From the Center for Agricultural Profitability at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln, this is Nebraska Farmcast. I'm Ryan Evans, and on this episode, we'll hear about a newly published report on the Nebraska Feedlot Labor and Management Survey that was conducted by Nebraska Extension and Nebraska Cattlemen. The survey looks at data through 2021 and reveals significant changes in labor costs, compensation, and management practices within Nebraska's feedlot industry over the past few years. To discuss the key findings from the survey, including challenges and trends that feedlot operators are facing in navigating labor costs and industry shifts, I am here with Dr. Elliott Dennis, Assistant Professor in the Department of Agricultural Economics at Nebraska. He is a co-author of the report. And Elliott, I'm glad to have you back again.
Yeah, thanks again for having me, Ryan.
Yeah, so this report, again, looks back at data collected through 2021. So can you just start by giving an overview of the Nebraska Feedlot Labor and Management Survey?
Yeah, so this labor survey has really been every 5 years, the Department of Agricultural Economics does the survey, and it's really used as a barometer, not only in Nebraska, but throughout the U.S. We started conducting this survey in 1990, and it's really been going on ever since. And so we originally planned to survey this in 2020. It was approved. COVID happened, and there was a lot of turmoil in the cattle industry, as everyone knows. So we administered that in 2021. And then over the last really several years, we've been kind of trying to filter through the data, and we did get quite a few responses, but unfortunately, a lot of those responses just didn't make sense as we started to add up what compensation looked like, basically total compensation per head day. And so we had to really make sure, since we know that this is used in the industry as a barometer to set and adjust wages, wanted to make sure that was correct. And we're glad that we're able to get it done and present it to the public.
Yeah, with good data, obviously very important to things like this. And you conducted this survey with support or cooperation from Nebraska Cattlemen, right, to help send the survey out to as many people in the state, I assume.
Yeah. So Nebraska Cattlemen has always been a great partner. We know a large portion of Nebraska is Nebraska Cattlemen affiliated, but not everyone, right? There's U.S. Cattlemen's and RCAF affiliates as well, and unaffiliated members as well. So we did send it out to them and other people who had attended University of Nebraska Extension events. Think about the feedlot roundtables that have been going on in January and February for almost every year. So those people who attend that, we gather information, we send it out to them and really ask for their participation. We don't offer compensation for participation. And so really this is just a goodwill offering that we kind of offer to the industry to say, hey, please participate so that we can provide this to others, not only in Nebraska, but throughout the United States.
And getting to some findings from the survey now, it did indicate that total employee compensation across the board, across all feedlots in the state, is up as of 2021. Mm-hmm. And in fact, it nearly doubled from 2015. What contributed to the increase in total compensation?
Yeah, so total compensation we look at in number of employees across all yards. And so what we saw is that a lot more yards are hiring essentially more employees. And so we look at total employees across all yards. That was the primary driver. We didn't see a huge change in benefits. And so it was really just taking on new labor, which really drove the compensation number.
And Nebraska Feedlots reported this significant rise in total compensation, but how have average wages, like for the individual employees, changed compared with that growth, especially compared with inflation, I guess? We hear a lot about inflation,
Yeah, we do hear a lot about inflation, and unfortunately, when we look at average wage adjusted inflation, it's not good. Essentially, we're behind in the kind of the labor compensation. So the term that we use in economics is called real wage. So we know nominal wages will go up generally over time. But when we look at essentially how much money does someone have, we adjust that nominal wage by inflation, and we call that real wage. Essentially, you can think of this as like your spending power, right? So if wages aren't increasing, but inflation is, then people are actually, their spending power goes down. And what we found is that, unfortunately, we're a little bit behind. by $2,000 or $3,000. But when we think about kind of where that was coming from, it wasn't coming from benefits. Our benefits have been pretty consistent over time across almost every category that we look at. So, I mean, we're looking at, I think about 14 different basically job titles: manager, system manager, mill foreman, feed truck driver. I mean, we cover the whole range there. And so that the benefits aren't the issue. It's really just the wage. And so when we think about, we hear a lot in the industry, oh, we're providing this huge benefit package. You can think of benefits including a truck, a place to live, all this stuff. Like we're doing well. It hasn't changed, but the amount that we're paying them hasn't. And so could be one of the factors that's, driving this kind of change in, labor shortage.
Yeah, and I imagine that's one of the main challenges that feed yards are facing in hiring and retaining employees, which, the survey also highlights a little bit about these hiring difficulties. So what did you find are some more main challenges facing the industry?
Yeah, so exactly, Ryan. We not only looked at what are you paying, but what are the factors that are driving why you're unable to hire individuals, or what are some of the factors that in retaining individuals. So we kind of highlight that and basically gave them different choices. The primary thing that we find is essentially about their desire and skill level. And so desire is kind of hard. That's kind of systematic, but skill level is something that you can actually train. There's basically unable to go and find individuals who have production experience in the communities that they interact with. This is a big issue. And so as fewer and fewer people kind of go back to rural America, to places where feed yards are generally located, and people who might have grown up in a rural area that want to stay there may not have had the opportunity to grow up in a production agriculture environment. So how do we help train those individuals to get that experience? I think the Nebraska Feedlot internship program is one example of how we're solving that, but there's a lot of other things that, like continual training. Once we hire someone, not everyone has the opportunity to go through an internship program to be placed in a feed yard, but can we provide some of those basically ongoing training programs? And I know Dr. Wywody in the Department of Animal Science, and Dr. Sperber and Pablo Laszlo and all in the Department of Animal Science are working through some of those issues right now, and we're assisting them in those efforts.
And this data we mentioned is from 2021. Do you have a sense, when it comes to just that labor retention issue, has that gotten any better since then? Because it seems like we hear a lot about labor as the main concern still today, as for operations across all ag sectors, really. But it seems like especially in feedlots where you need some of that skill. Is it still an issue?
Yeah, it's still an issue, and there's really two factors here, right? Can we find an employee if they're out there? And then are there employees? Those are two separate issues. Are there employees is generally what we call labor supply. Are the people willing to go and work for you is kind of that pull to your operation. And so one of the ways that we kind of look at that is saying, what are the number of job openings versus number of people are looking for jobs? And what we find is that number is less than 1. It's about 0.7. And that varies, year to year, month to month. Essentially what that means is for every job opening, there's 3/4 of a person that's being able to fill that position. Okay. Mm-hmm. So what that means is that we're in a very tight labor supply. And that's not necessarily a positive thing for us, because that means, what do we do to attract individuals? Well, the primary thing that we use to attract individuals is wages and benefits, or what we call total compensation. And so when we're thinking about trying to attract those individuals, first, is it the individual that we want to attract, and can we get them to stay? Mm-hmm. I think there are feedlots out there that I'm aware of that are doing a good job at this. They do a very proactive job on advertising, getting people to come into the program, and training them while they're there. And for the most part, they get people to stay. There's going to be some attrition, as with any job, but they're making a proactive effort to try to recruit, train, and retain individuals.
And you talked already about how the survey did look at various employment positions throughout the feed yard. So I think you mentioned 14 different positions. Are there notable differences in the compensation and benefits across different job titles or maybe feed yard sizes? What kind of trends did you see there?
Yeah, there's probably two noticeable differences here. The first was the manager position, and the second one was the kind of this maintenance foreman that's out there. And it's important to note that not every yard is going to have these individual job titles, right? So when we're talking about large yards, they are going to have the luxury of saying, yes, this person just does this and this person does that. The smaller yards, they may only have a couple employees and they're going to do everything, right? So that's some of the challenge that we face in this. But noticeably, the manager compensation was down from 2015, and we really contributed that the manager position posted in 2015 was probably a little high when we look at the trend of where we kind of should have been from 1990 to now. We're pretty much in line in our 2021 number. That 2015 number seems to kind of be an outlier. Okay. That maintenance foreman is also kind of an interesting thing as we start to think about new technologies start to come in, and just kind of that need to have a person who can kind of fix and repair things. That is really kind of key. And we do break it down by employee type, by feedlot size where available. And so we kind of break it up into three different categories. I think it's less than 5,000, 5 to 20,000 and 20,000 plus, I think were the categories there. But we do kind of break it down by the feedlot categories. And so if you have I have a feedlot that's about this size, what are they paying for this? I'm thinking about hiring someone. That's what is kind of used as reference. Of course, what do we know? It's always as good as the data. So that's why we encourage people to participate in that survey, because if not, we're unable to provide this information to the public.
Yeah, and you mentioned when you first started that this is a survey of Nebraska feed yards. However, it's used in the industry from across the country. So how do you see trends that are identified in this survey, information presented in this report, helping to shape maybe the future of the industry, or at least help industry leaders with their decision making?
Yeah, I get a lot of calls on this survey in particular saying, where's the number? How did you come up with this number? Because people in Illinois, Iowa, Kansas, Wyoming, they're looking at this survey and saying, okay, this is what Nebraska's paying. I can now adjust it back to Wyoming or Illinois to figure out what I should actually pay for this type of individual. It does a great deal even to USDA when they're thinking about where is the feedlot industry at. They're looking at Nebraska, and it's because it's such a diverse place. There's a lot of production differences across the state, north to south, east to west, and so that's why it just kind of gets this nice kind of representative of where the industry's at. Definitely helps kind of set kind of where compensation's at, but a lot of other people have started to do this as well, right? So there's banks and there's different companies that are trying to survey their surveying their clientele of kind of where they're at. Those are useful and great. I think the benefit of what we're doing at the University of Nebraska is that it's regardless of maybe who your bank is or who your rep is or who your affiliation is, can we kind of capture a broad swath of individuals and say, okay, yeah, this is where compensation is regardless of where you're participating. So it tends to be a bit more, I'd say, representative and not so so much program or bank or company specific.
Yeah, great.
Which aren't generally publicly released.
Oh, right.
Those are used internally and not available to the public.
Yeah, good point. Yeah, thank you. One last question before we wrap up here. How can the labor, or is the labor supply issue in the feed yard industry affecting, or how might it affect the entire beef industry as a whole, from like the cattle producers to consumers at the grocery store?
Yeah, so I mean, it's obviously just one aspect of the entire beef supply chain, and there are labor issues in the feedlot, and there's labor issues at the cow-calf sector, at the meat processing plant. But when we think about being able to feed cattle out, and then in preparation for harvest, it definitely is a bottleneck. COVID-19 obviously showed us that. That wasn't necessarily a labor issue. That was more of, can we place cattle in there? But it just kind of goes to show that if we have issues in one segment, it can affect a lot of segments. So, for example, if we have reduced labor, there's probably potential for the ability to not get cattle processed. We're obviously going to be limited on how many cattle we can take on because of just number of hours in a day. And then we always have to think about the skill set. If we're bringing people who are unskilled and need training into the feed yard, there's a potential for injury. There's a potential for animal welfare issues. There's potential for, cattle not performing as well. And that's all just kind of this ongoing. We need to recruit the individuals to be there. We need to train them all out there. And then we need to make sure we're providing the compensation necessary to retain individuals in the feed yard. Recognizing that some attrition is going to happen, but it's something that maybe in the past we've been able to have this luxury because this labor supply was really large and a lot of people were looking for work. It's not necessarily the case now, and it doesn't seem to be the future looking forward for us as an industry in the next 5-10 years.
All right, great information today. And if you are listening to this on a podcast app, you can find in the description for the podcast in the notes a link to the new report on the Nebraska Feedlot Labor and Management Survey. It's also on our website for the Center for Ag Profitability. You can find it at cap.unl.edu/feedlotlabor21. Elliott, thanks so much.
Yeah, thanks again for having me, Ryan.
Nebraska Farmcast is a production of the Center for Agricultural Profitability at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. For the latest research-based information and education resources to manage your farm or ranch operation, visit our website at cap.unl.edu. That's cap.unl.edu.